Hello, my name is Shawn Guidry, and today we will be discussing what assessment is, the types of assessments, such as performance assessments, and the professional aspects of assessments that are discussed in Chapter 11 of the book Foundations of American Education. I will be covering pages 314 through 320 if you would like to follow along in the book. What is assessment? I will be covering the second half of assessment because Mr. John Havard has explained in greater depth the first half of the topic in his lesson, but I will provide a recap of what was learned in his lesson. Assessment is derived from the Latin word assessio, which means to sit beside. An assessment may be used to further one's knowledge and experience from the feedback given after the assessment. Examples of assessment measures are paper and pencil tests, performance assessments, portfolios, journals, and observation checklists. The purpose of assessments. The main purpose for assessments are to help students learn better, but assessments are used for a variety of different reasons and are not solely for the benefit of student success. The main types of assessments. The main types of assessments are norm reference, criterion reference, and capstone, or otherwise known as summative reference. The norm reference assessments show the results of who is best in that area, such as science, math, English, and social studies. The criterion reference assessment shows results of who is best in that subject, such as physical science, chemistry, or earth science, which are all subjects of science. And lastly, the capstone assessments show results of who has mastered that concept. That was just a small recap on what Mr. John Havard has went over. If there are any questions about the purpose and types of assessments, please refer to Mr. John Havard's lesson. I will now begin with the second half of assessments. Performance assessments and professional aspects. Performance assessments are described as being effective for student learning in real-world situations. These are also known as authentic assessments. The concept is that by teaching students on subjects resembling real-world situations, the student will be better prepared for the task he or she may have to complete in the future. An example would be a student whom is taking a driving test. The student is tested by being presented a number of issues which resemble that of real-world situations. Such an example may be termed as an authentic assessment. There are three main ideas to consider in using authentic assessments for standard-based tests. The first is the need for a rich field of inquiry, or a large number of questions. A few examples of the types of questions that encourage students to show different ways of knowing are analysis questions, comparison questions, and deduction questions. The second is the need for a diverse field of inquiry, or many different questions which enables diverse types of thinking. As one may see, these questions ask what, where, why, etc. The last main idea is the need for a measurable way to tell if the student is learning from the assessment, otherwise known as the learning standard. The teacher must provide indicators which can measure the student's progress on learning. An example of this is a rubric. Such a rubric would be a number evaluation from 1 to 5, 1 being unsatisfactory, 3 being average, and 5 being perfect. Speaking of rubrics, the next topic I wish to discuss is the two main types of rubrics. The two categories of rubric are the analytic rubric and the holistic rubric. The analytic rubric is most often reflective of specific scores, whereas the holistic rubric is flexible for unexpected teacher scoring. The type of rubric to consider using should be based on the type of activity your classroom is doing. Examples of these two rubrics are shown on page 318 of Foundations of American Literature. Keep in mind that these assessments given must be fair and must truly assess what was intended in order to use these rubrics. Now that we have looked at the two types of rubrics used when evaluating assessments, we must review the quality of such assessments. The book lists 6 determining factors needed for assessments to be deemed of high quality. The first determining factor is to use standards of learning to base assessments. The second determining factor is to provide authentic situations of understanding. The third determining factor is to incorporate assessments into your curriculum and instruction. The fourth determining factor is to diversify evidence of student learning. Or, in other words, provide different ways for the student to show how they are learning. The fifth determining factor is to evaluate standards without using unnecessary standardization. The final determining factor is to get together with fellow educators to discuss ways for designing and scoring assessments. Student accommodations. The idea of student accommodations must be present in the minds of assessment makers for an assessment to be effective for those who need such accommodations. Factors to determine an appropriate accommodation include a student's disability, the age of the student, the nature of the assessment, the skill or subject being assessed. Please refer to Table 11.5 on page 319 if you would like to see the testing accommodations usually given to English language learners and students with disabilities. Fairness and reliability of assessments. The book mentions very briefly about the fairness of assessments. The last 2 points about assessments I wish to make is that, according to the book, state tests are biased towards low-income families, whereas performance tests take into account variations in student learning, while still meeting standards. I believe this means that performance tests are found to be more suitable for students because of their variable learning. An example of the reliability of an assessment is that where 2 students who have learned the same amount complete the same assessment and receive identical scores. This means the assessment has high reliability. Thank you for your attention, and if there are no further questions, then Ms. Nicole Finger will cover the lesson of accountability for Chapter 11.